Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good day, good night, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Aidan Walker, the Program Director of Design China Beijing Forum. It's a job that gives me very great pleasure, but it's also a matter for sadness that I can't be with you in Beijing right now. Here I am in my Sussex garden on the south coast of England. My son is filming me, helping me say hello to one of design's unique figures. You can't obviously qualify unique, but there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Ross Lovegrove is a unique design visionary. I've known his work for many, many years, more years than I'd care to remember, and for many years also I've wanted him to come and speak either at Design Shanghai or Design China Beijing. He has a completely unique, I keep using that word, completely unique vision. His sense of the relationship between nature and technology, he's always seeking new form, he's always expanding the boundaries of his understanding and generally our understanding of materials. There's almost nothing I can find to say more highly about Ross Lovegrove's work. The title of his talk is The Search for Immaculate Form, and ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I must stop and let you listen to Ross Lovegrove. Thank you.
My name is Ross Lovegrove. I'm a designer and sculptor of 21st century technology. This is my studio here in London. We built it. It's next to David Hockney's original studio next door in Notting Hill. And it's where we work for a lot of global entities. I've been working now pretty much for 35, 40 years, and over that period I've transitioned, of course, from the 20th century through into the 21st century. And I think this is really, really important because with all these years ahead, now with new technologies, certainly the digital realm, all sorts of new possibilities are unfolding. I started working with the analog, which was the handmade, the hand-drawn, handmade models. And I did that actually in the 70s, and it was a great skill base. It's a bit like sculpting cars, where you would have a slow burn in the way that you would observe what you were making. So that a lot of those objects from that time, cars, Olivetti computers and so on, were just so beautifully balanced and proportioned because of the time and the very, very direct human element. Talking about human elements, these are some of my objects within my world. I collect them. This is it's a silex. It's called a pound of butter. It's Danish. You can see where it's oxidized, where it was being left exposed in the earth, and that's the darker side. This is handmade by a craftsman probably around 15,000 years ago, during the Stone Age, when stone was the material of the age. Of course, we don't live in the Stone Age now. We have all sorts of incredible new materials to work from. So it makes sense to be able to design with those materials and those tools in the most contemporary way you can. Doesn't make this any lesser of the object. This is an incredible object. And remember, in its day, everybody around the world, even children, could make objects like this because their life depended on it. These are some of those objects. This is a hand axe. It's from Papua New Guinea. And look how ingenious it is in the way that the maker, the artist, has selected the wood, bound the wood, created a natural spring, and then inserted with this sort of clay, this axe head. It's one of my favorite objects. And I mean, of course, it's not relevant today, but it's certainly emotionally relevant. So what I want you to appreciate is the emotional pull and gravitas of the work that I'm trying to do within the studio. And I've always followed my instinct. And the thing is with instinct, it's been burnt out of us. And we need to now, you know, if you look at other objects that I've created over the course of this career so far, architecture, for example, circular buildings made from 3D printed concrete and carbon in New York with the first umbilical elevator that is not straight. This is my Kyoto car, which I designed in response to the fact that Japan never signed the Kyoto Accord, and I thought a car called Kyoto would have a lot of meaning. Art installations in Tokyo with Tokujin Yoshioka and Issei Miyake, cellular automata, scans through the human spine and then amplified using digital data, and then this stereophotography created. When you're next to these objects, they have an incredibly human dimension. So if you look at that for a second, and then follow me back to look at an object like this. This object is called a pyrosome, and it's a phenotype. We made a study of how you would take, in the modern age, you would take the making of this by forming a software that would allow us to design in the same way that the ancients did. But in doing that, you realize these incredibly complex forms, like the cellular automata, for example. And then, you start a studio, you have a partner. I was in a little team called Lovegrove and Brown. Julian was an incredible designer at the Royal College. I learned so much from him. He had this finesse, this Japanness. He'd been to Japan. It was this mysterious place, I couldn't afford to go as somebody working class and just fighting for one's own existence. But he introduced me to other really attentive qualities in the way that you would design. So we formed a partnership, and out of that partnership came many different objects. This was in mid to late 80s, and this is one of them. It's called Basic, and it's thermos flask. And this, I show you this because this is an analog design product. There were no computers and no software. Well, they were, but not to the level we wanted at this time. You could play a Pac-Man game on a computer, but you certainly couldn't design this. So this is mind-conceived, hand-drawn, hand-modeled, and then, of course, machined into the tool to make an object like this. This object is the way it is because when we received the glass bottles from India, they were so remarkable, almost like a space capsule, that we thought, why on earth would you want to hide that within a brutal form? So that's why it's transparent. And you're talking about 1988, this object was designed. And I just found recently some of the original ones, and I was talking to Yves Behar out in San Francisco, and he's got a great family with lots of kids. So I said what I'd do, I'd send him one of those original ones, just as a sort of a belated wedding present maybe, and a big thank you for all the work that he does in design. So that's an interesting example of something analog. But entering the 21st century and using an analog process doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I mean, why would you sit near the beach carving a stick saying that you're going to design one of the most advanced Teslas on earth? It doesn't make any sense. So you have to invest in hardware, software. But even if you have that, if you don't have the right mindset, you will not deliver the right things. For years, since I was a child, I've drawn, and I've been enthralled by organic form and the fact that when you draw, there are no boundaries. You can invert, you can create really what you want in a very coagulated, very complex way. And what I see around me over these last couple of decades of design, yes, it's beautiful, yes, it's nice and simple, and yes. But I think sometimes simplicity or reduction like that is just an excuse. I just don't think it's the capability of who we are. We are complex animals with incredible biological systems. So I've been interested again since I was a child, walking through nature, to be the designer that, along with others like Kalani and so on, would investigate sculptural form, but as it's born out of nature. So what we do is we're going from the mechanical, which has a particular form to it, through to the biological. And once you get to the biological, you start to get incredible new shapes and the use of new materials and so on. And that's where 3D printing is really, or additive technologies, is really the natural harmonic with the way a 21st century designer should work. Recently, I finished a project for Formula One. It was to design a new perfume model, and what you see here are some of the 3D printed models as we were researching the way that we would integrate a suspended flask with an external body. And remember that Formula One is that. This design is a metaphor for Formula One in that you have a highly fragile, delicate internal being protected by an outer skin, which, if you look at it today, is magnificently formulated to be this convergence of science, physics, technology, and materials. So these forms that you see in my design are not gratuitous. They are generated from the ideas and the language that is actually being generated within Formula One. So it's not gratuitous. I'm not interested in any of that. But you can see here how these kind of objects can really develop. These were studies. This is 3D printed directly in nylon, black nylon, by the company, in fact, that makes all the Adidas shoes, and actually working with assistants who do all of that kind of work. So I have a network. I work a different way now, so it allows me to work as a sculptor, as an artist, at scale. I'm working on a big project in Shenzhen right now with Nagami, which is FDM. It's a deposition, robotically printed polycarbonate series of elements. I mean, the scale is incredible, and the optical dimensions you couldn't get with any other means. So here I am. I've moved between the analog world of the 20th century, starting in the 70s, with deep respect for the work of people like Castiglione and Sottsass, for example, right through now today, where there's new voices emerging, but mainly in the field of architecture. Most of my friends and the people that I employ come out of architecture. Why? Because their training is immense. They understand the software, they understand structures. And it's not really about getting a conclusion initially. You get that later through people like me giving that input, telling what looks right, what looks wrong instinctively, with a form of emotional intelligence, if you like, without being too calculated. So yes, these are objects that surround me. They're part of my world. Like this one, this is called Convergence, which was the centerpiece for my Pompidou show a few years ago, which was a large show over 1,000 square meters, showing pretty much a life's work, but in sort of chapters of engagement, from ecology through to organic essentialism, OE, which is something that I practice. These are biowood studies, for example, which I hand carved, and when people look at them, they don't know if they're natural or artificial. And then projects like this, wow, which for me are quite mind-blowing. This is for Swarovski. It's my solar car, and it has 1,000 crystals mounted onto 3D printed little stands, which what they do is they harness the light and they distribute that onto photovoltaic panels. But it's almost a sort of convergence again of everything that I know. That's built, that's the model, but the real one exists. It's 4.2 meters. It's housed in Wattens in Austria. And it's a symbol, I think, of where we could go with car design in the future, where everything should be doing more than it does. We should be living with an immense synergy with nature. So I don't copy nature because that's irrelevant. but I harness the intelligent principles of nature and its intelligent form, as I say, to move from the mechanical to the biological, but in doing so, create objects which, even if you didn't know me or were not really interested in design, they would just blow your mind. So yes, I mean, I can't be there at the moment, but I'm in close contact with Aidan Walker and the team, and I'm looking at ways that I can engage more with the Chinese culture and its immense sophistication. I'm not interested in filling the world with irrelevant objects. I'm interested in engaging with like-minded people across design and art at any scale. That's from space to transportation through to handheld objects, the future of the telephone. All of these things. I think it's a great time to be a designer. It's certainly a great time to live with or without pandemics and so on. That's just a blip. We're going to ride our way through with this great optimism and put that optimism into the objects that we